So, we're on? Okay. Hello, and welcome back to the Media Dimension, the podcast where we gather to review and analyze obscure and popular media like. As usual, I'm your increasingly erudite host, King. Now, let's go deeper. In our previous episode, we held an hour-long special on a piece of media I hold dear, 2018 Celeste, and why it should be brought to the classroom setting, given how it can be analyzed as well as many other literature or film. Today I'd like to continue that thesis with more media, which brings us to this episode. Today I present the topic, although much shorter, a chilling novella that deserves a similar treatment in the hopes of it being circulated within school curriculum. The story, you ask? Well, Christopher Fowler's Crocodile Lady. A story that mixes claustrophobia and the fear of loss with London's underground and school field trips. As I am one of the 23 people who've read this book, I'm going to need more help in this review. With that, I present to you my guest speaker from beyond the starbound astral planes, Hugo! Hey, so, are we going to review movies on the internet in an over-the-top manner like everyone else? Do I remember it so you don't have to? But no, I'm a bit too uncharismatic for that. Today we're reviewing a book, The Psychological and Real Fears of Crocodile Lady. Besides, movies take much longer to view, and time is money in this world. And yet, here you are, wasting it. Noted. So let's bring attention to the opening, as that can always make or break a piece of media. There's two openings. So how should one tackle this? I'd say with administration. The author uses a style I haven't seen much before. It's one of the only short stories that has chapters, even if they are rather short. With each, a section of the subway line is described, not in visual imagery, but descriptive history. Wanting to slow down the story, it appears unrelated for a chunk of it. Area and era. I'm stuck with the author appearing more so as an underground cardiographer. I'd argue this adds to the psychological side of things if we mix the past and present together, actually. It creates a harsh break in between the train rides that the chapters take part of. More importantly to the counterpoint, I'm certain it's meant as a reflection to the main character, the returning from retirement teacher, the Crocodile Lady herself. Given each subway line described was once important and valuable, but cast aside in age as the world moves on. As each chapter description gets darker, it coexists with the Crocodile Lady's panic of keeping watch over children and anxiety within the crowded and confusing tunnels. I get this, but it still comes off redundant to me. Given that the returning teacher says, and I quote, "God knows I was nervous enough to begin with. It was the first day back on my first week back at work after 12 long years, and I hadn't expected to have responsibility thrusted at me like this." And then much later, and again quoting, "After I've been at home for a while, I found I had trouble going out, like a loss of balance, a density of people, disorientating architecture, things like that." You see, the author knows how to focus on character and dread, but I think these chapter openings aren't the way to do it. To each their own. But do you think they could totally be scrapped? A counterpoint to my counterpoint, eh? You brought up the importance of these to the character, and I see it, truly, especially in the importance later, but I'm still leaning to it as a turnoff. Saying something like it's not as bad as the yearling and wordiness isn't a compliment, you know. As I see the actual opening as a character introduction, I for one am a total fan. Biased, but as a bloodsucker for dark humor, the author nails this regard. The opening line comes from the other teacher, Deborah, with literally saying she hates all the children while calling them rude words I'm restrained from saying on this talk show. Throughout it, she constantly jokes about the kids falling into oncoming trains and having to make everyone lie about the mess, and then do cover-ups to get out of doing more paperwork. I am laughing just thinking about it right now. I agree. I think it applies itself within laying a good foundation of foreshadowing, and the opposite with red herrings. What is expected as one of the teachers or disruptive students being a cause of a serious accident ignores the actual matter and plot of a child getting kidnapped. Speaking of this opening, I really like the way it establishes the Crocodile Lady, since she's much more formal and rationate-minded, but also optimistic. She views the children in a kinder and more compassionate light than Deborah, or the commuters, and being able to keep them safely in two lines over crocodile formation. But she also gets contradicted whenever she relies on her older sense of teaching, or whenever the children begin to actually be disruptive. Similarly, she prides herself on being able to get a feeling for children just based around their school bags, pencil holders, or certain mannerisms, perhaps hinting that she may be her own unreliable narrator from her outdated viewpoints. However, our key takeaway from these two opening chapters is that we really get a sense of slow character building and relations before the actual horror begins. In this, there's multiple external dialogue and inner turmoil from the so-called Crocodile Lady. She's deeply worried by the underground and how it's almost like a crypt, and she picks up that many angry eyes upon her, both from Deborah by getting told off by a boomer, along with the fellow passengers hating the little children. Agreeable from my standpoint, of course, but that's more me having some empathy towards the older woman. Again, with the reverb of anxiety from her, the shapes of the tunnel is important to her being. I already described her quote of dizziness among building structures, but the storm they escape the tunnels in is swirly and messy, said tunnels being very abstract in design and spiraling into even more abstract holes. The crowds are often seen as a mess of color and unrecognizable shapes. I'd say to remind me of Junji Ito's Yukamasa, or Spiral for all you uncultured swines, as it too uses weird shapes to make the audience and readers uncomfortable. But I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. You haven't read it yet? It's a really good read. But I guess that's besides the point here. I like your connection, though, seeing how similar ideas are taken in different directions. Speaking of, this brings us to the third chapter, where the horrors begin to rear their heads, or rather shrink away. The Crocodile's Lady anxiety begins to reach its breaking point as everyone moves ahead, and Deborah ignores her pleas to do a head count. However, this apprehensiveness appears to hold weight, given that the quiet, shy, and bully kid, Connor, is missing from the group, and apparently still in the train with a stranger. It's around this point in the story where both teenagers begin to change personalities and somewhat introvert on themselves. It's Deborah now who's more reassuring and watching the children, while our main character is much hastier and more reckless, removing herself from the group to save Connor. If I'm allowing myself to bring it up again, the chapter's openings that describe the train lines begin to show more importance here. The descriptions paint the trains as existing in strange and dangerous places, which again reflects on the Crocodile's Lady's psyche. Old habits die hard with you, huh? But yeah, I see where these opening headings hold a grander scheme of things. Still not a fan, but their approval is growing, making the train rides more intense in the chase to save Connor. More importantly, from a narrative, the story changes in horror from feeling helplessness by being overwhelmed from children to feeling completely alone. I think it's not a coincidence that there are multiple times where she's pushed against masses that are actively holding her away. Hold it. The old action story bit of growth in the Crocodile's Lady's own character arc. The second chapter has her try to find peace with Deborah, and she brings up her dead husband both externally and in thought, someone who keeps her shackled down from working with children, and the strange architecture of the city for that matter. The fear of the crowds, while still there as seen in her actions from stumbling and the ability to call for help, are somewhat recited, making her leadership, compassion, and authority traits shine brightest. Right. I was more along the lines of it adding tension and actually going against some of the traits you brought up. It honestly seems really thoughtless to chase after somebody, using multiple trains in a chase and eventually through tunnels on foot, when there's multiple instances of security or people with the ability to help. I see it again as the woman not being a very reliable narrator through her fear, or not holding a stronger sense of authority or understanding as she originally thinks. That's where the part of the horror comes for me, finding out that you're not fit for a job or discovering aspects you hate or are unaware about yourself. That's an interesting take from a perspective that's not usually considered. It details playing to the idea of crafting an unreliable source, though additionally through fear or lying to the self, not to the audience. Though I'm retaining my point that her authority characteristics does increase towards the ending whenever she finally catches the man that has been holding Connor's hand and leading him into a false sense of security. She not only fully stands up to the man, but is able to de-escalate the situation and calmly save Connor and escape. It's this use of authority that saves the two from the men, giving she appears as a relaxed but firm teacher to anyone, convinced that stranger that led Connor away that she was once his teacher, but that he must move on since the classes have dismissed long ago. Seems unrealistic in my opinion. The ending, I mean, of course. But honestly, I'm more confused as to why the stranger looks exactly like Connor, just much older than the boy. Since the confrontation takes place in the tunnels, maybe part of reality blurred mixed with adrenaline and fear. Perhaps it's a sense of pity given how fast the crocodile lady shows sympathy towards Connor. Seeing the old man like the child given that he faced similar hardships according to the teacher's inner dialogue. The ending stage, she feels unsure about a sort of empathy towards the stranger, though she's trying to move on from it herself. Strange either way. It feels like the ending lacks a lot of meaning, which would hurt the idea of bringing it to discussion for class, but many points leading up to it hold different views. I like to see more discussion about this short story, especially compared to others that are already in the classroom setting, such as A Good Man is Hard to Find, which, tries to justify a serial killer as a good person and likable for killing a family of mildly rude people, unlike here where the stranger's confrontation and actions lead to some pity, but more so confusion and just doubts. It appears we share some same thoughts, where aspects can lead to discussion, though maybe not as deep as needed for a classroom setting. Regardless, in seeing the time we had, I hope we were able to make sense of media analysis. Perhaps you might want to check out the novella or other works by Christopher Fowler. I am grateful for the time we had, and thankful for seeing us to the end. Maybe we'll meet again, on here or on Instagram. But in current situation, thank you for watching. But before we go, a final message from our sponsors, Raid Shadow.